Hello everyone, welcome to another video. So this is kind of another summer recommendation, but these are all the books that I think you might enjoy that have the setting being on a ship or a boat. So I thought that would be fun. I have one middle grade book to show you, and that's Dark Waters. This is the third book in a quartet written by Catherine Arden. And this is about a group of kids who go on a day trip in Lake Champlain, and they think that the Loch Ness Monster might be there. And then I have some YA novels. The first one is Challenger Deep by Neil Shusterman. I am a huge Neil Shusterman fan. I have not read this one yet, but I've read several of his other series and have loved all of them. So I'm excited to eventually get to this one. So this is about a boy who is apparently dealing with some mental illness problems, and he's on a trip with his high school, and he's kind of the resident artist that's supposed to make pictures and document their trip. And they're traveling to the Marianas Trench, to the deepest part, which is called Challenger's Deep. So Neil Shusterman's very good at his character development and at his storytelling, and I always get connected to the characters. So there's always a lot of depth and nuance to his stories, so I'm excited for this one. Then I have a couple of Sweet Valley High books, which have a nostalgic place in my heart. I loved reading those as a teenager. So the first one is Lost at Sea, and this is about the Wakefield twins, and they're on a vacation with their family, but a storm comes up, and Elizabeth and a guy named Winston get in the lifeboat because they're forced to go overboard, but they kind of drift off into the fog and are never seen again. So when the storm passes, they're trying to find this lifeboat that has Elizabeth and Winston in it and save them. And then this next one, I didn't realize it was part of a duology, and this is the second one, so that's a bummer. I guess I'll have to find a copy of the first one, but it's called Killer on Board, and it's got a step back cover, which I always love. So it's got the twins, and they're terrified, and there's this guy with a knife, and he's out for revenge, and he's on a mission to hunt down and kill Jessica and Elizabeth Wakefield. And so they're on, once again, a family vacation, and as the title says, there's a killer on board the ship. So this is a book I haven't read since like junior high, and it's a classic, but I really liked it at the time. I reread it a few times. I don't know how it would hold up reading it as an adult, but we have Rough Waters by S.L. Rotman, and this one kind of reminds me of a YA version of, what was that movie called? The River Wild, I believe it's called, with Kevin Bacon and Meryl Streep. It kind of reminds me of that movie, if you've seen that. So this boy, his job is helping his brother do White Rapid river rafting, and he gets kind of coerced into going on this trip with his brother's friend that's like a bad influence on him, and he didn't want to go, but he ends up having to go to help out, and different scary things go down. So it's a bit of a thriller, but I really enjoyed it as a kid. I want to reread it as an adult and see if I still like it a lot, but at the time I thought it was well written and exciting, and it was really good. This isn't something I would have read as a teenager either. It was not anything close to what I would want to read, so the fact that I really enjoyed it speaks volumes. And then we have the Jackie Faber series, starting with Bloody Jack, and I absolutely adore this series. So the first one isn't necessarily my favorite, but by the second book I was completely hooked. And our main character, Jackie Faber, she is one of the most well-developed characters I've ever read in literature. I absolutely adore her. She's very fierce and independent and smart, but she also can be feminine, and she can cry when she's scared like a normal person would. You know, sometimes you get these He-Man woman warriors that just act tough all the time, but she's not afraid to cry and blubber when it's warranted. So I really enjoyed that aspect, but I just really love her character. She's very gray. She's a good person, but she's okay doing things that are a little bit morally gray or maybe indecent for the time period in order to do what she seems is right. So I just really adore this series. I think there's like 12 volumes. So our main character, Mary Faber, she is a poor girl living on the streets of England, and she decides to dress up like a boy so that she can be a stowaway on the ship and find a job as a cabin boy, which she does, but she's got to hide the fact that she's really a girl or they're gonna throw her off the ship. But Anyways, it's a really fun adventure stories. And then we have Pirates, and this one is actually very similar to the Jackie Faber series, but as a standalone. There's only one book. And basically the same thing where there's this girl who dresses up like a boy and gets on a ship with her best friend, and they're trying to make it to Australia, I think, or something, because she doesn't want to marry a man that her dad wants her to marry. It's been a really long time since I've read this, so I don't know all the details. That's just the most that I remember about this story, but I did enjoy it. Probably, I don't know if I enjoyed it quite as much as the Jackie Faber series, but I'm not sure because, like I said, it's been a long time. But if you like pirates, if you like ships, if you like adventure stories, then you'd probably like this. Okay, and then I have a YA horror novel called Cursed Cruise. And this is the second in a series. The first one was Haunted Hotel. And this is about a group of teenagers that are also paranormal investigators. And so, obviously, in the first book, they went to a hotel, and this time they're going to go on a ghost ship and do their paranormal research stuff. So, I have not read them yet. Or, sorry, it's Horror Hotel, not Haunted Hotel. So, the first book is Horror Hotel. But, anyways, so I haven't read either one of them. They're really short little novella length books, so I'm hoping to get to them soon. But it sounds like a fun time. Then we have a YA dystopian novel called The Stranded by Sarah Daniels. And this is about the end of the world. Obviously, it's dystopian, and all of the remaining survivors ended up on this big cruise ship or something. And so everywhere else, they can't go. And I'm not sure why that is. I don't know if it's like there's anarchists out there that are going to kill them. I don't know if it's like the other ones are feral. I don't know if there is no other people and there's something about the land that's toxic. I haven't read this one, as you can tell. But for whatever reason, for like a couple generations, they've been stranded on this ship and just been, floating around. And a group of people decide that they want to try to make it to land and see if they can salvage the earth and try to make a new society on land instead of being stranded on the ship. Because as I would imagine, you can only have so many people because you have only so many supplies, and I don't know what they would do for food. And so I'm assuming once you reach a certain age, they probably I don't know, and they probably also have a limit in how many kids you can have because there's just not room for that many people on a ship. But anyways, it sounds fun. It's kind of thick, but YA tends to be fast, so that's probably not a problem. And in true YA fashion, this is a part of a trilogy. And then we have a YA thriller called Lying in the Deep by Diana Urban. And I read this last summer and I thought it was a good time. This is about a girl who's on a cruise ship, and it's like almost a campus on the ship. So they're doing their schooling, but they also are going to various destinations and, getting a cultural education. And then they're also having classes on the ship as they're getting to their next destination. So her best friend on the ship, or I should say former best friend, because they were best friends, but they had a bit of a falling out, and that friend ends up going missing, and she's afraid that she's been murdered, and she's trying to figure out what happened to her. So I didn't figure out what was happening at the end. It did surprise me with the twist, and I thought it was a fun time. I enjoyed it. Okay, so now we're moving on to the adult books, and we're going to start off with some classics. So the first one is a science fiction novel, which is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. And I have not read this book. I haven't seen the movie for this. The most I've had contact with this is watching League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. So I know it's about this man named Nero, and he's on the Oculus, I believe it's called. And it's this really long, skinny ship, which I imagine is pretty fast because it just cuts through the water real nice. But yeah, I really don't know anything else about this book. Let's see if I can read it real fast. It looks like he's on a mission to rid the seas of a monstrous creature, which I feel like I've seen that, like a squid. I've seen covers with like a squid or something taking over the ship. So this might be like a kraken type of story, but looks like some of the members end up overboard and they're trying to help save them and different things like that. But anyways, I'm sure it's a classic for a reason. I hear a lot of people like it. So I've never read anything that's science fiction from that long ago. Like I've seen War of the Worlds, but that's about the oldest it gets, or maybe the what is it, the Body Snatcher one. Anyways, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. So I don't have a whole lot of experience with classic science fiction. I guess you could consider Dune classic because it came out in like 65, but either way, this would be a new experience for me. So let me know in the comments if you've read this and if you enjoy this as a modern reader. That would be good to know. And then I could talk about classics such as like Moby Dick or Treasure Island or Mutiny on the Bounty, but most of you guys have already heard of those, so I'm not going to talk about those too much. But I do have a copy of The Sea Wolf by Jack London. I haven't read this either. I just got a bunch of these old books from my grandma when she passed away, and so I just nabbed some of them, but I haven't read all of them. So I don't know anything about this. It just says when Humphrey Van Weyden was rescued by the sea hunting crew of the Ghost, he becomes an unwilling sailor under its captain, Wolf Larsen. The men who sailed with Larsen were vicious outcasts, and the captain himself was a violent and dangerous man. And then it says, The Sea Wolf is Jack London's powerful story of the conflict of good and evil. So it says London was a worshipper of the strong and virtuous hero and a firm believer in the inevitable triumph of good. So kind of a classic story, but again, if you've read this, let me know if it's a good one. Then I have some horror novels. The first one is from My Queen, From Below by Darcy Coates. And I really enjoyed this one. It had some really creepy moments, and she's really good at her descriptions. And I enjoyed it in the past for that reason the most, because it goes kind of back and forth in time a bit, and the passages and the scenes in the past were by far the creepiest, and I really enjoyed them. It was very mysterious and atmospheric. However, I will say this isn't necessarily my favorite Darcy Coates book. I had a really hard time connecting to any of the main characters. They just felt very one-dimensional and kind of flat. But as far as the atmosphere goes, it was very claustrophobic being on that ship. It was very creepy. It was very weird and bizarre. So I do think it's good for those elements. This is kind of like a haunted house book on the ocean, kind of. It's not really a haunted house, but there's like some supernatural things that are happening, but they're not ghosts. I don't know what they are. It's like, you can't really describe it, but there's like a weird illness that took place on the ship back 100 years ago, and so they have this crew in modern times, kind of like what they did with Titanic, where they're gonna scuba dive down there and see if they can salvage anything from the ship. And then you get some passages from back when the ship was on its, I don't think it was like a maiden voyage or anything, I don't know, but you know, it was kind of a ghost ship that had this mysterious, weird illness that was making people crazy and doing bizarre things. But so that part was very unique and very interesting. Haven't read anything like that. And then speaking of Titanic, we have The Deep by Amakatsu. And this one is about Titanic and the Britannica. Is it called Britannica or the Britannic? Something like that. Which was also like the Titanic, where it went down on its maiden voyage. And our main character actually was a survivor of both catastrophes. So she was on Titanic and the Britannic and went down with the ship both times. And it sounds like there's going to be some ghostly stuff. I haven't read it yet, but I hear it has ghosts, which I always like. I love a good ghost story. And I hear it has a really good seance scene, which I'm also a big fan of. So I meant to read this last summer. I never got to it. I really want to read it this summer, but I don't honestly know if that's going to happen because I have a ton of NetGalley arcs next month and then, you know, YouTube plans in August. So I don't know if I'll actually get around to reading this, which makes me so sad because I really wanted to read it this year. But I love supernatural ghost stories. I love the Titanic, so it sounds right up my alley. And this has been on my shelf for way too long. I need to read it. Then we have some books that take place in the cold. So normally we think of like cruise ships or yachts or that kind of stuff. You think warm summer, but we're going to talk about some cold books. First we have The Terror by Dan Simmons, and this is about a group of men from the British Empire that were sent up north to find the Northwest Passage through the Arctic to get supplies through, and they get stranded. And there's some kind of creature out there, and they're running out of food, which leads to cannibalism and different things. So it's a very, very long book. I haven't read the book, but I watched the miniseries and thought it was very good. And then in that same vein, we have The Haunting in the Arctic by C.J. Cook. And this one takes place, as you can tell, in the Arctic. But this is like The Terror, also about the men that went to find that passageway and got stranded. But I think this one's going to be a little bit more supernatural. I haven't read it yet. It just came out like a few months ago. So I think this is a dual timeline where you have modern people that are going to the shipwreck or this ship that's been stranded in the ice, and they're trying to figure out what happened there. And then you have scenes from the past where apparently some kind of haunting or supernatural event took place while they were stranded there. So it sounds like a fun time, and I'm excited to read it. And then we have Where the Dead Wait, and I believe this is also about finding the Northwest Passage. So this is apparently a fun topic for people to write about. And I had a NetGalley arc of this, and I thought it was okay. It wasn't my favorite. It did have some chilling moments, and it did have some grotesque parts about cannibalism and stuff, but I don't know, it was a little bit hard to get invested with the characters. Like, I couldn't keep the characters straight very well. And I don't know, there was parts that I did enjoy. But I think on the whole, it's not something that's going to stick with me, that I'm going to remember very well, that I'm going to wildly recommend. So take that for what you will. I do think it's a good time if you're into that type of writing and into history and into a snowy, cold read, but I wouldn't say it was a favorite. But if you really enjoyed The Terror and or A Haunting in the Arctic and you're looking for something else that's very similar, then this one might fit the bill. And then we have Oracle by Thomas Oldhoyvelt, and this one is not out in the ocean or the sea, even though it does have water on the cover. But from the premise, it sounds like this ship is actually in the middle of a forest, which is pretty intriguing. And so one day these couple of kids just stumble upon this old wooden ship that's in the middle of a wood, and they're like, how did this ship get here? We're in the middle of a forest, there's no water anywhere near here, so how did the ship get here? And of course, because they're kids, they want to explore. So one of the boys, I think it might be a boy and a girl, but the boy decides to go inside the ship, and he never comes out, just vanished, just gone. And so this starts a media frenzy, and everybody comes down to the ship to try to figure out what happened to this boy and to figure out why the ship is where it is. So it sounds very entertaining. I loved Hex by this author, so I'm really excited to read this one as soon as I possibly can. And then, of course, you have to talk about Jaws. This is a classic horror novel. I don't even know for sure if it's horror, but I think so. But it's a creature feature anyways. And so this is about a white shark that's been terrorizing this little town, and the mayor of that town is having difficulties with the people that live there because he's trying to keep them safe from the shark, but he also needs people to go to the beach because the tourist season is when this little town makes all their money. And if they don't have tourists going and swimming at the beach, then they're not going to make money, and their economy is going to break, and people are going to suffer financially. So he's kind of between a rock and a hard place, and he's trying to get rid of the shark and protect the people, but also tentatively let them still swim and everything else. And I really like that small town politics aspect to the story, and it's just a fun time. I did find it kind of sad and interesting that this book made people really afraid of sharks. We've always hunted sharks for food, but I think there was like an uptick in violence against sharks simply because people were afraid of sharks. And the author was so upset and sad by this that his book would have this kind of impact, and he actually went on to advocate for helping sharks, and I think it even might have led to like Shark Week and stuff. It's just making people aware that sharks really aren't the scary, dangerous monsters that they were portrayed in this movie. You know, this was a fictional book that was just meant to entertain. It wasn't meant to make people afraid of sharks. So I thought that was interesting. And then we have Dark Voyage. I have the ebook of this. It sounds like it's about a ghost ship, and again has supernatural elements in it, which I always enjoy. And I thought the cover was really cool and it was cheap at the time, so I bought a copy. I read my physical copy books over my ebooks most of the time, so I've been wanting to read this for a couple years now and just haven't gotten to it, but hopefully I will soon. And then we have some sci-fi horror, starting with Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes. And this is basically a haunted house story on a ship, but this isn't your normal type of ship out in the ocean. This is a cruise ship in space. So think Wall-E, where they had this cruise ship out in the middle of space. It was the maiden voyage, just like Titanic, but the people never returned back to Earth. And so this cruise ship just has been out there floating in space. And so a team is sent to find this ship and figure out what went wrong and what happened and figure out why this disaster happened. I know this is a very divisive book. Some people hate it, some people liked it. I fall in the court of liking it. So I thought it was a good time. I liked the atmosphere. It was creepy. I was intrigued by the mystery. And when you did finally get the reveal of what the history of the ship was, I think a lot of people didn't like it. And I was okay with it. I mean, it's not like my favorite thing, but I don't know. I thought it was interesting and intriguing, and I hadn't read anything like this. So I give it points for that. So yeah, I thought it was entertaining. I thought it was fun, and I enjoyed my time with it. I have the next book by S.A. Barnes, which is Ghost Station, and that's actually my book club pick for this month, so I will be reading that one real soon. And then we have Ship of Fools, and I haven't read this one, but I do hear it kind of strays into horror territory, even though it is science fiction. And the only thing I really know about it is there's this generational ship that's flying around that's, Earth trying to find a place to land where they can live, and they have a run-in with some aliens, and I think there might be some religious stuff in this book too, where it's like secular people and religious people on the ship clash a bit. I could be wrong about that, but I hear it's really good. I hear good things about this one, but again, just haven't got to it, just not enough time. Okay, so we've talked about some adult horror novels, and now we're going to talk about some thrillers. Starting with The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. And this is about a journalist who writes like a travel piece for a magazine, and so she gets the opportunity to go on this cruise ship, and one night she sees a woman fall overboard. And so she, of course, alerts the crew and tells them, hey, this woman fell overboard, we need to go rescue her. But all of the passengers are soon accounted for, so they don't know who this mysterious extra woman was on board that supposedly fell overboard, and so they don't really believe her that she, maybe she was hallucinating and seeing things, thought she saw a woman fall overboard, but obviously they didn't because all of the passengers are there. So it's kind of up to her to use her journalistic sleuthing to figure out what happened. I bought this after reading The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware and really loving it, and I wanted to read some more stuff by her, so I bought this. Haven't got to it, been on my shelf for years, but one day I will. So if you've read this one, let me know if it's a good one. And then we have The Stowaway, and this is about a woman who was part of a jury that let this famous serial killer go. She was the deciding vote that let him go free, because even though she acknowledges that what this man supposedly did was horrific, she just didn't think there was enough evidence to convict him, and so she voted against it, and that was the one vote that let this man free. And so when the press and the media found out, they all, went after her and demonized her and was like, how could you do that to these families of the victims and all this stuff? And so she gets this opportunity to go on a vacation, and she jumps at the chance to get away from all of these hateful comments and all these people that are being mean to her. So she hops on this cruise ship, but then one night a body is found, and it's mutilated in the same ritualistic manner that the serial killer did his killings that she had let go. And so now she's trying to decide if it was a copycat killer or if she really did let a serial killer go and he's on the ship with her. And then we have The Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie, and this is your classic murder mystery trope. So these people are on this ship for a wedding and somebody ends up dead. I don't want to tell you who it is because it might be a spoiler, but one of the people on the ship is murdered, and so Hercule Poirot, who is on the ship, it's up to him to figure out who done it. I haven't actually read this book, but I saw the movie and thought it was a lot of fun. And then we have The Last One by Will Dean, and I had a NetGalley arc of this one, and it wasn't my cup of tea. I didn't really care for the twists. I didn't care for the reveals of what was really going on. But this is about a woman who wakes up on a cruise ship and she's all alone. No crew, no other passengers. She just wakes up and she's just completely alone out in the middle of the ocean. So understandably, she's freaking out, and she slowly starts to meet a few other people that are also on the ship, and it kind of turns into this survival story. And then the reveals come and they're pretty crazy, not gonna lie, but they're just not really to my taste. I didn't really care for what was going on the ship. I just didn't really like it. And then the last like 2 pages, oh my gosh. I think it could have been an epilogue, I don't know, but that last part made me want to chuck the book across the room. I was so mad. So anyway, so this one didn't really work for me, but I know a lot of people that do really like it, and so I just wanted to recommend it to those that think it sounds good, because I think a lot of people did like this book. It just wasn't quite for me. But if that sounds intriguing and you want to figure out what this mystery was, then go for it. Then we have The Lion's Den, and this is about a woman who is invited to go on this vacation with her friend and a bunch of her other friends, and she's excited to go. But then when she's on there, it sounds like the host becomes kind of controlling and overbearing and won't let them get off the yacht, and so now they're in some potential danger from their host. And then we have The Yacht by Sarah Goodwin. I haven't read this one yet. I just bought the ebook copy not too long ago. But this is about a woman who goes on this yacht, kind of like The Lion's Den, with her friends, and she's having a party and she's living it up and woohoo. But then somebody in the course of the night cuts the rope, and so this yacht that was supposed to be tethered in the marina is sent adrift into the ocean, and they didn't realize it until it's too late, and they all pass out because they're drunk and drinking and having fun. And when they wake up, they're out in the middle of the ocean. There's no land in sight. There's no fuel to get back. They're just stranded adrift on this yacht. And then, they start getting picked off one by one. And then you have Adrift. And this one has a trope that's not really my favorite. This woman wakes up with amnesia and she doesn't remember how she got on this boat. She's on a sailboat in the middle of nowhere, but she has a note that tells her that she should just leave and forget who she was and start a new life somewhere. I don't always love the amnesia trope. Sometimes it works for me. Sometimes I feel like it's a little convenient. And then I want to recommend, I say recommend, but it's not really a recommendation because I haven't read this one, but it's called Devil in the Dark Water, and this is by Stuart Turton. And I've read 2 other books by this author, and I didn't like either one of them. But the premise of this one just sounds really good and sounds right up my alley, so I guess I'll give him one more shot to impress me. But this is about a man who was a detective, but he was accused of murdering someone. And so his bodyguard is kind of trying to clear his name and show his innocence. And they end up on this ship, I'm not sure how, but they end up on this boat, and it sounds like the devil might be on this boat, or more specifically, a demon. And so people start hearing whispers at night, and there's like this guy that supposedly died of leprosy, but he's walking around, and mysterious things are happening. And then it was like something goes down to the point where they're granted like 3 miracles, but then somebody has to be sacrificed afterwards or something like that. So it sounds really good. It sounds really interesting. So I don't know. I just have not been impressed by this author so far, so I guess 3rd time's a charm, and we'll see what happens. Then we have Five Nights, and this is about a woman who goes onto a yacht, and she had just married into the most powerful and wealthy family in the world, or one of the 5 wealthiest families, sorry. And she is on cloud nine and thinks everything's great and hunky-dory, but then somebody in the family starts to threaten her life while they're on this journey to New York for the next 5 days. And then last, we have The Invitation by Lucy Foley. And this one, I guess, isn't a thriller. Lucy Foley normally writes thrillers, but this one sounds like it's actually more of a romance. But it's not like a rom-com or anything. It's a little bit darker than that. So this man meets this girl named Stella and falls madly in love with her, but then she disappears and he never sees her again. And then years later, he gets the opportunity to be a reporter on this yacht in the Italian Riviera, and they're traveling towards this famous film festival, and he's very excited about it. But then he meets Stella, who becomes a passenger on this yacht, and he's thrilled and wants to win her back, but apparently she's bound to this dangerous and influential man, so he's trying to get her away from him because he's become a little bit obsessed with her. But anyways, it would be interesting to see her write something a little bit different and see how I like it. Those are all the books I have for you. I hope you found something that you didn't already know about that you want to add to your TBR. I hope you find some good reads for the summer. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up to let me know what kind of content you want me to keep making for you. Please hit the notification bell if you want to be alerted to more videos, and hit the subscribe button, and I will catch you next time. See ya.